Most people don't realize how easily they give up control of themselves, not through big dramatic moments, but through small emotional reactions. A comment they didn't like, a tone that felt off, a situation that didn't go their way. Suddenly their mood shifts, their thoughts get louder, their behavior changes, and without noticing it, they're no longer in control of themselves. The situation is, that's how emotional instability quietly runs most people's lives. They think they're responding logically, but in reality, they're reacting emotionally. And once emotion takes over, clarity disappears. Now here's the part most people never question. Why are they so easily triggered? It's not because life is harsh. It's because their emotional state is tied to external events. Someone disagrees with them leads to they feel challenged. Someone ignores them, they feel rejected. Someone criticizes them, they feel attacked. And in every case, the trigger is not the event itself. It's the meaning they attach to it. That meaning is what creates the emotional reaction. But emotionally stable people operate differently. They don't immediately assign meaning to everything. They don't treat every comment as personal. They don't assume every situation is about them. Instead, there's a gap, a pause between what happens and how they respond. And in that gap, control exists, because most people react instantly. There's no space, no delay, no filter. The emotion hits, and it becomes behavior immediately. But when you build emotional stability, that automatic reaction weakens. You start noticing something important. Not everything deserves a response. Not everything deserves interpretation. Not everything deserves emotional energy. And that realization alone begins to change how you move through situations. When someone tries to provoke you and nothing happens, the dynamic shifts immediately. Because they expected something, a reaction, a tone shift, a defensive response. But instead, they get calm. And calm changes the entire structure of the interaction. It removes the leverage people usually rely on. Because emotional control is often the easiest way people influence others. They say something sharp, wait for a reaction, and adjust based on it. But when the reaction doesn't come, the pattern breaks. And when the pattern breaks, people lose direction. That's where emotional stability becomes powerful. Not loud, not aggressive, but deeply controlled. Or the kind of control that doesn't react to pressure the way most people expect. To become emotionally stable, you have to first understand what actually creates emotional reactions. Most people think it's the situation itself, but it's not. The situation is just the trigger. The reaction comes from interpretation. Two people can experience the same moment and feel completely different things. One person hears criticism and feels motivated to improve. Another hears the same criticism and feels attacked or discouraged. The external event is identical, but the internal meaning is different. That's the real control point, and most people never learn to manage it. Instead, they outsource their emotional stability to external conditions. If things go well, they feel good. If things go badly, they feel unstable. If people treat them nicely, they feel confident. If people challenge them, they feel shaken. So their emotional state is constantly moving, up and down, stable one moment, reactive the next. But emotionally stable people break that cycle by changing one key thing. They slow down interpretation. They don't instantly label situations as good or bad, personal or impersonal, success or failure. They give space before assigning meaning. And that space changes everything. Because in that space, emotion doesn't automatically take over. You get to choose your response instead of being pushed into it. Another key shift is understanding projection. Most of what people say or do is filtered through their own emotions, insecurities, and experiences. When someone is rude, it often reflects their internal state, not your value. When someone is distant, it often reflects their priorities, not your worth. When someone disagrees, it doesn't always mean rejection. It can simply mean difference. But emotionally reactive people personalize everything. They assume everything is directed at them, and that makes them easy to trigger. Emotionally stable people don't fall into that trap. They separate themselves from the emotional state of others. They observe without absorbing. They listen without internalizing. They respond without overreacting. And this creates a very specific effect in social interactions. When someone tries to provoke them and doesn't get the expected reaction, the dynamic becomes unstable for the other person. Because now their usual method of influence isn't working, like they say something sharp, expecting emotion, they don't get it. They test again, expecting escalation, still nothing. And slowly, they begin to lose control over the interaction. Not because you're fighting back, but because you're not reacting at all. That's the core of emotional stability. It doesn't fight energy with energy. It removes the fuel entirely. And without emotional fuel, most triggers simply stop working. The final stage of emotional stability is when it stops being something you practice and starts being something you are. At first, you consciously remind yourself not to react. You pause before responding. You try to separate emotion from action. You actively work on staying calm when something hits a nerve. But over time, that effort dissolves. You don't need to control yourself anymore, because you're no longer being pulled in every direction. At this level, emotional triggers don't disappear, but their impact weakens dramatically. The same situations still happen, people still say things, life still creates pressure, but your internal response is no longer automatic. There's distance now, and that distance is everything, because instead of being inside the reaction, you observe it. You notice the feeling rising, but it doesn't immediately become behavior. It passes through awareness first, and in that moment, you regain control. Most people never reach this point because they confuse emotion with identity. If they feel angry, they think, I am angry. If they feel disrespected, they think, I am disrespected. If they feel rejected, they think, I am rejected. But emotionally stable people separate identity from emotion. They understand that emotions are temporary states, not permanent truths. Anger rises and falls, discomfort rises and falls, frustration rises and falls. But identity stays grounded. And once you truly understand that, nothing external can fully destabilize you anymore. People may still try to provoke reactions. They may still test boundaries. They may still expect emotional responses they're used to getting from others. But what they receive instead is consistency. Calm tone, measured responses, no unnecessary escalation, no emotional overreaction. And that creates a very specific psychological effect, because people are used to feedback loops. If they push, they expect pushback. If they create tension, they expect tension in return. But when that loop is broken, their usual strategy stops working. And when strategies stop working, people lose certainty. They start adjusting their behavior. They start thinking more carefully before speaking. They start becoming more aware of how they're coming across. Not because you're controlling them, but because your stability removes the emotional leverage they rely on. That's the quiet power of emotional stability. It doesn't dominate situations. It doesn't escalate them. It simply refuses to be pulled into them. And over time, that creates something most people don't expect. Respect. Not because you demanded it, but because you are no longer emotionally predictable. And in a world where most people are controlled by their reactions, the person who can't be easily triggered becomes naturally unshakable.